Welcome to Metaphysical Soul Speak. I'm your host, Elena Fox Starks. Hey guys, I hope you're doing really well in this moment in time, and that whenever and wherever you happen to be on this beautiful planet we all decided to incarnate on at this time, that you are only paying attention to the extent that you must to the news that is distressing and disturbing. Now, I don't recommend ever watching the news. CNN stands for constantly negative news. Not my saying, but I did get that from T. Harv Eker back in Denver, Colorado, many years ago. But I've been made aware recently through Instagram posts and emails. I don't watch the news, but I've been made aware of the case of George Floyd. I don't know what he did. I do know that he had an officer kneel down on his neck for about 5 minutes, and he died. He was a black man. So a lot of people are very upset about this, obviously, because no one deserves to be treated like that. And the argument is, if he had been white, he wouldn't have been treated like that. So, and I don't disagree with that at all. I think that's probably very much true. And there was also a case of Breonna. I want to say she lived in Chicago. I forgot her last name. But she was a frontline health worker. She was an EMT and had won awards for her fast response, just for being a really good person. And she was well known, loved, and just liked in her community, and everybody that knew her loved her. Well, the police went in March 13th and just went into her house, and 6 officers, and shot her dead. And later it was said that it was a case of mistaken identity, and yet those officers still have their jobs. In my opinion, they should be in jail. But she was also black, and so a lot of people are angry about this, and I'm angry about it, but I've gotten over the anger. I worked through it rather quickly. It doesn't mean that I think any of it was justified, because obviously none of it, not one iota of it, was justified. But it's easy to look at these things and get extremely wrapped up in the separation of it all. And it's easy to be angsty about it, to get very angry and irate about it. And I think a lot of people are just feeling like they are just not okay right now. And there's no justification for anything. This is all so wrong. But some people are going so far as to say that this is spiritual warfare, all kind, and people are really angry. And it's not spiritual warfare. what it is, what's happening. When you look at the grander scheme, the spiritual side of it, is that these kinds of issues were always around, unfortunately. Very sadly, this is true. Racism has always existed, and a double standard for the quote-unquote authorities have always existed for how they arrest white people and how they arrest black people, and it's not fair. But why is it happening now when we're supposed to be going through the greatest time of humanity right now? We're supposed to be ascending, right? And then we see these stories, and it makes our hearts descend. It makes us angry, and we want to get back at these people. We become filled with that righteous indignation, which we have a right to. We have a right to feel whatever we feel. But it's not spiritual warfare. It's just that all of these things are happening right now at this time because it's always happened, but it's happening now so that it's pointed out. There's like this massive glowing light on it. It's an issue that needs to be fixed. It is a shadow side of humanity that needs to be basically shown a light on. We have to shine a light on it, highlight it so that we can take care of it collectively. And unfortunately, we can't bring back George Floyd or Breonna. We can't bring back the countless others that suffered police brutality. What we can do is say prayers for them. We could say prayers for their family. We could say prayers for their communities that are deeply affected. And we could say prayers for all of the people in the greater Earth community that were affected by it. Everybody with a heart was affected by it. I was affected by it. Everyone with compassion and love at the core of their being, and they're aware of that, were affected by it. But I want you to consider that short of signing a petition or going on a march, maybe writing letters or making phone calls after you've done those things, it's time to get back on track with your spiritual side. We need to wake up humanity. We need to rise up and ascend. We need to forgive this act, as heinous as it is. We need to send love and compassion to the people who were the victims of this. And it's very likely that they chose to be here because they are absolutely brave souls who came here to be in that situation so that they can shine a light on what's still wrong with humanity. And when it comes time to vote for things like the chief of police, if that's how it's done in your town, it's time to find a new chief of police. It's time to fire those officers. And it's time for multicultural training and retraining. And it's time for some people to get other jobs. Hey, maybe they work as janitors or something that they can do, that's not really working directly with the public. I used to be a janitor. I loved it. As an introvert, I loved it. But, I'm not saying that's like a punishment, but it's a job that you don't really have to deal with coming in contact with the public a lot, which is why I loved it. It was ideal for me. And I just did like for 3 months over the summer. And I was going to be a senior, and I wanted to earn money for my, class ring, stuff I don't even have anymore. I wanted to earn for my Letterman's jacket and whatever. But anyway, getting back to the issue at hand, there's always going to be things from the sleeping ones, the people that are not spiritually awake. There's always going to be the bad acts that occur. If they were open to who they were, with the love and the compassion that they were created with, if they knew who they were and realized that we are all connected to each other, if they knew all of that, they never would have done any of those bad acts to begin with. Now, there's no making excuses for them, and there's no, there is forgiving them, yes. But these people they don't deserve to have those jobs any longer. They are not an authority. They need to get out of there. But you have to come to a point in your spiritual journey and along your quest of compassion where you can no longer be affected by the outside world. You cannot allow all of them, those people outside of you, you cannot allow them to affect your internal compass and your own peace, your own sense of peace. You have to make peace and love the core of your being. And when you do this, when you can sit in your own power and you sit in your unshakable faith in the power of love in this universe, then nothing can affect you. Because the real quote-unquote spiritual war is the spiritual war that is inside of yourself. When you allow yourself to be blown this way and that, every time something happens outside of you, do you go off running in that direction? Are you angry about it? Are you going to allow it to ruin your day, your week, your year, your life? You might have the same color of skin as the same color of skin somebody else has who has something terrible happen to them. But that's not really affecting you directly, except in the case that we all are one and it affected you on that level, right? So I don't know how to say this, it's gonna sound right, but every person in the world, we all have the same color soul, right? Whether it's blue, transparent, all the colors of the rainbow, whatever the color of the human soul is, we are all connected. We all come from God. And we chose to come here to learn about separation and to learn about not liking ourselves or being hated for what we are, what we chose to be. And that's a lesson. All of it is a lesson. But when you are on the path of spiritual enlightenment and you're trying to become a spiritual master, you need to rise above your identity. Like our identity, like for example, for me, I'm a woman. I'm white and also Native American. I am, so I say I'm Cherokee. My grandpa lived on the Cherokee lands. He's Cherokee. So another identity point for me would be that I am a witch. I'm a hereditary witch. I just discovered it last year. I always wished I was, and then all of a sudden all these spiritual insights started flooding me, and I realized, oh man, I am that. I am that. I'm also an American. I'm a Californian. I'm a mother. See, all of these things, I'm a daughter. For a long time, I was a wife. And those are all points of identity. But those points of identity keep you in separation. I'm a wife. I'm not a husband. That keeps you in separation. I know it sounds weird, but when you start to realize the higher truth of everything, I'm a white woman, so should I feel the injustice of everything that happens to every white woman? Ever? Or maybe I take it down to like a more basic thing. I'm a woman. Should I be angry at everything that happens to every woman ever? I wouldn't stop being angry. Overall, I'm very upset about what happens to Black people that is unfair. That makes me upset. Because they don't deserve to be treated differently because of the way God made them. Right? And the same thing with Latinos or Asians or any group that people identify with based on something so arbitrary as the region you're born and the color of your skin and the way you talk and the language you grew up with and the music you like even, It seems like it's arbitrary, And we all get our chance to be all of these things. I was Vietnamese in my past life, my more recent past life. And I have memories of being Guatemalan in a past life. So we have different experiences based on what our soul wishes to learn. And it's all very, very arbitrary because, like a friend of mine pointed out, underneath the skin, we are all a white skeleton. We all look the same underneath, literally. And he always wore things with skeletons. He wore like skull earrings and skeleton bandana, and he even had pants that had skeletons all over him. And people were scared of this guy. They were terrified. And I just walked up to him all, I need to understand you. He's like, why? And I go, I don't know. I'm oddly compelled. I need to understand you. I'm like, what is your obsession with bones and skulls and skeletons? What? And he said, because underneath the surface, we're all the same. And he was Chumash Indian, or Native American, I should say. He told me I'm a Chumash Indian, is what his words were to me. But he was Native American. He was from the Chumash tribe in Santa Barbara area. And he had been discriminated against quite a bit based on who he was. And so he just became more of who he was and decided not to worry about whatever everyone else thinks, not even the people in his own tribe or his own family. And he's one of the most deeply, Rusty Smith was his name. He was a chiropractor in Santa Barbara. Probably still there, probably still doing that. The other reason he wore bones is because he was a chiropractor, which I thought was cool. One of the coolest people I've ever met in my life. And he said, you're really brave. I'm like, why? And he was a bodybuilder. He's like really muscular and he covered in skulls. Like people saw him and they're like, ooh, stay clear of that guy. But I just took a chance and I got to know him and I loved him. He became a really good friend for years. When I was in my early 20s, when I said like 19, 20, 21, something like that. We were really good friends. And he was very deeply spiritual. He always went on spiritual quests. But that one struck me. That hit. Underneath the skin, we're all just white skeletons. We're the same. Our bones are all the same. No matter what color you are, what region you are, how tall or short you are, we all have the same bones, and they're all the same. So that's what he chose to focus on when he saw people. Plus, he's a chiropractor, so he always dealt with bones anyway. But as I've gone on my spiritual journey, I started thinking along those lines in a spiritual way, and I realized our souls are all the same. Our souls are enormous. And no matter how tall you are in your physical body, which is just a shell, the soul is so much grander. I mean, you could be 1.5 feet tall in your physical body, but your soul might be 30 feet tall. I don't know exactly how tall our souls are, but we're all about the same, and our souls are all kind of the same color. Like I said, I don't know, rainbow blue. I don't know what color we are, our souls, but it doesn't matter, right? But all these weird little things that are happening in the news, and they're big deals. I'm not going to diminish it because it's a big freaking deal what's going on. I'm choosing not to be angry at it. I was angry yesterday when I heard these things. But I'm choosing today not to be angry because that takes me away from my spiritual journey, away from my spiritual path. And this kind of crap is always going to be going on. And the best thing that I can do, besides signing the petitions, which I've done, and voicing my truth about it, which I've done, and sending love and light and prayers to the victim and the victim's families, which I've done. After those things are said and done, I'm back on my spiritual path. The best thing you can do, the best thing I can do, is to stick to our spiritual path in a way that we sit in our own power with unshakable faith, in our unwavering quest for enlightenment. When I become enlightened fully, then it's like I'm sparking the people around me, and they start their spiritual journey, and they get better. And when they become enlightened, they do the same for the people next to them. Iron sharpens iron. You can light a candle with another candle, but you cannot light a candle with a candle that's not lit, right? So you just have to stay lit. You just got to stay enlightened to the best of your ability and keep going so that you become more and more and more enlightened. Because the brighter it is, the brighter we become, the more illumined we become. We get closer to becoming spiritual masters, ascended masters. And once we're ascended masters, we can help other people to get out of all these stupid illusions. The illusion that I'm a woman and you're not, so we're separate. Or I'm a mother and you don't have kids. Or I'm divorced and you're married, so we're different. Or I'm this color, I'm purple and you're green. It doesn't matter. None of this shit matters. You have to get past it. I have to get past it that there's no separation between us. There are nothing. There are no walls. There's no barriers except that which we decide to imagine. The illusion is all illusions. It's all Maya. M-A-Y-A, the Guatemalan word or the Mayan word for illusion. It's all Maya. So you can't really expect to become an enlightened master someday while still separating yourself. I have a driver's license, you don't, whatever, you know what I mean? I have a house, you are homeless, so we're separate. No. Because everybody is equal in the eyes of the Lord. You are the Lord. And everybody is 100% the same. Like literally. We have different personalities and we laugh at different things and we like different music or whatever. Wear different clothes, whatever. But when you look at us from a soul or energetic standpoint, we're all the same. We are equal. And the only real thing that separates us is whether or not we choose to be on the enlightenment path, or if we choose to take up arms because somebody's karma came a-calling in another city, or because some people decided to be racist in another city and hurt somebody that looks similar to you. And it's, again, I'm not trying to diminish that, because if I was in the United States, you best believe I'd be out there taking the streets, with all the people who care about humanity. Regardless of the color of my skin, I would be out there. I've already marched with various groups my whole life. I've been a social and political activist my whole life, right? So, but it seems that the world sometimes is at odds with our spiritual enlightenment journey. And this is one of those instances. Like, a part of me, I wish I was there, man. I'd be just, But I also realize, as a person on the spiritual path, where my biggest commitment is to my own spiritual enlightenment, so that I can help not only myself, but all the people around me. The only way I can do it, from my perspective, is to just become better every day myself. I still do other things. I inform people, and I write, and I sign petitions, and whatever it takes. Whatever I can do from here. But I don't hold on to it, and that's the key. You can do all those things, and please do, by all means. Daily Kos, K-O-S, they always have petitions. I have a whole bunch of them, I get things to sign all the time. And I sign them, and I don't have emotion. When I'm done, I drop it. It's in the past. And I let it go, so that I can return once again to the present moment and stay on my journey of spiritual enlightenment. And I'm not claiming to be a spiritual master now or anything like that, but I know I'm on the path to being that, as are you, by the way, and as are the seemingly evil people in the world who are still sleeping. They're also on an enlightenment path. Everyone's on the same journey. It's just that some of us are miles ahead of those people who choose to do these terrible things. I mean, they're way the frick back there. I don't think they heard the starter pistol go off yet. While the rest of us are hit the end of the race. We're like nearing the finish line. We're nearing that finish line. So, if you are feeling very, very angry about it, allow yourself to feel your anger to the fullest extent that you possibly can, but do not allow yourself to feel it for more than 2 or 3 minutes. Because anger is really bad for your body. And your getting sick it really does nothing for the world. It doesn't help or save the world one iota. Your anger doesn't help or save the world one iota. And anger, when held too long, will lead to hatred. But anger is really just a band-aid for the emotion of hurt and sadness. So if you feel angry, allow yourself to feel angry, but then start to realize, what do you really feel? Disappointment, sadness, sorrow. But don't hold on to those emotions too long, because that will lead into a deep, deep-seated grief that can lead to depression, which can lead to like homicidal or suicidal thoughts, right? And again, you don't want to go there either. So I'm not telling you to ignore your emotions, of course. Feel your emotions. But if they are destructive to your body and destructive to people around you, and they're not really serving any purpose other than your own ego. And you feel like you have a right to feel that righteous indignation, which you do. Sure, feel whatever you want, but if it's not serving your higher purpose, if it's not serving anything other than your ego, it's time to feel it and then forget it. Just drop it and get back into the energy of love and that enlightenment path, because that's where we're going to make our greatest strides. That's where we're going to feel our greatest accomplishments in the long run. And the better we get, the better we can do for other people, and the better they can get. We give them permission not to hold on to things that didn't even happen to them. When we give ourselves permission not to continuously feel negative thoughts and negative emotions towards something that did not happen to us. Do something about it when you can. Feel it, the energy of it, if you must, which anyone hearing this is going to be angry. I was angry. If you're cold-hearted, you don't feel anything, but I definitely did, and I'm sure you guys did too. But don't continue to hold on to it. Again, remember, that's feeding that ego. It's feeding that cycle of birth and death and rebirth. You don't want to be stuck on Earth. You want to get away from this place. Enjoy it while you have it. Enjoy it while you can. But become an enlightened master. Become an ascended master. Jump off that wheel. We've got the opportunity right now to jump off that wheel. So send love and light to everybody. Don't hold grudges towards strangers. Don't hold grief for strangers, because maybe they don't need that. Nobody needs to feel the brunt of your anger, your guilt, your frustration, your grief. And in a way, it's false, because, if you don't really know somebody, on an empathic level, you're going to feel it. But if you don't truly know somebody, like you didn't grow up with them laughing and joking every single day of your life, sure, it's going to affect you, shock you, upset you for a few minutes, but you shouldn't be holding on to this for 2, 3, 4 days, weeks, years, a lifetime. It might affect you, but don't hold on to the emotions of it that are no longer going to serve you, because they also do not serve humanity. If you're angry about something and you visit your 83-year-old auntie in a nursing home, your anger is going to affect her, and she doesn't even know what the hell's going on, right? You don't want to affect people around you with negative stuff, especially when it is concerning one of these items in the news that just, it's shocking, it's upsetting. You're going to talk about it, be angry, like the rest of the unawakened collective. But if it didn't affect you directly, it's time to let it go. Do your social activism, but then let it go. Take a deep breath and just, I'm good. Gonna be good. Anyway, I'm going to get into our space weather news, okay? I'm being a little bit quiet again because I'm recording this at 11:30 at night, and I've got neighbors. They all go to bed so early. Like, my God, you don't hear a peep out of anybody. I don't get it. Why? And no one's going to work, so why you have to go to bed early? But there's something about the energy of this place that just, like, get up. I mean, I was up at 8 o'clock in the morning. Unbelievable. I tried to go back to bed and I couldn't even fall asleep. There's something about this place. It makes people have a normal schedule. So it's like a disciplinary place for me. I don't know. I guess I needed it. Anyway, I'm going to look for the space weather tab. Hold on, because remember, I'm on my tablet. All right, here we go. The solar wind conditions right now is 299.8 kilometers per second, so it has slowed down. We have 0 sunspots. It's been 26 days without a sunspot, but there was a B-class solar flare coming off kind of the back of the sun. We haven't seen the sunspot yet. It's not facing us yet. But B-class flares are not very strong. They're kind of mild as far as solar flares are concerned. But it's kind of exciting because it looks like that might be coming off of a sunspot from solar cycle 25, which is kind of the new one. It hasn't really gotten underway yet, but they did capture a really lovely picture of it if you want to look on spaceweather.com for that. Let's see. Ulu neutron counts, basically the cosmic radiation bombarding us, has gone up 0.6% since yesterday. It's now at 10.3% of the entire space age average, and it's considered to be very high. So lots of radiation. Nothing new from the coronal hole. Remember, the 29th as well as the 30th, we will be bombarded with some solar radiation from the solar winds, and I think we're going to get 2 blasts on the 29th, so that's going to be a fun day, which is basically tomorrow. It's Friday, so Friday and Saturday is how we're going to start our weekend with this extra cosmic radiation as well as the solar winds hitting Earth. There were 5 sporadic fireballs, according to NASA's All-Sky Fireball Network. And let me see, I think that was it. I don't think there's anything else on this website. Okay, I always have to check because it's like... Alright, I think that was it for now. Alright, as far as the Schumann Resonance news is concerned, from disclosurenews.it, it looks like they were only at power 21. So 21 hertz frequency on the Schumann Resonance scale. That is the highest they were in Italy today, in the past 24 hours. And according to the GCMS magnetometer, I don't know how to say that word, sorry about that, the Schumann Resonance's power, the last recorded moment that they have for heartmath.org is basically the 1900 hour on Tuesday, so that's 2 days ago, on May 26th. So I'm going to relay that to you right now. California started off, well, I'm not going to say where they start off, but they ended around 134 hertz frequency. Again, this is at 7 o'clock in the evening, or, 1900 hours. Both Hofu, Saudi Arabia, and Lithuania continue to be at 0 at that time, at 1900. And in Alberta, Canada, though, this is from 2 days ago, so again, there's a little bit of a delay for some reason, but Alberta, Canada saw 263 hertz frequency, which is pretty big. And Northland, New Zealand was at 73 hertz frequency, and Hulului, South Africa was at 231 hertz frequency at 1900 hours on Tuesday, May 26th. So something is definitely going on. It's weird that 2 cities are 0, but I mean, numbers like that, 230, 260, 130, those are huge numbers. So something is definitely going on with the Schumann Resonance. Alright, we need to check this. Okay, cool. Alright. So we are on lesson 301 with A Course in Miracles. You can find this at acim.org, or you can go find an app. There's plenty of apps about A Course in Miracles. You can hear my dogs, not my dogs, I don't have dogs, but our friends, the dogs, outside barking at something. Hopefully it's not too loud on this recording, but anyway, in A Course in Miracles, we are on lesson 301. Again, the workbook is free for the Foundation for Inner Peace, and it can be found at acim.org. So lesson 301 is this: and God himself shall wipe away all tears. And God himself shall wipe away all tears. Father, unless I judge, I cannot weep, nor can I suffer pain or feel I am abandoned in or unneeded in the world. Let me read that again. Nor can I suffer pain or feel I am abandoned or unneeded in the world. This is my home, because I judge it not, and therefore it is only what you will. Let me today behold it uncondemned. Through happy eyes, forgiveness has released from all distortion. Let me see your world instead of mine. Let me see your world instead of mine. And all the tears I shed will be forgotten, for their source is gone. Father, I will not judge your world today. God's world is happy. Those who look on it can only add their joy to it and bless it as a cause of further joy in them. We wept because we did not understand, but we have learned the world that we saw was false, and we will look upon God's world today, and God himself shall wipe away all tears. Again, that's Foundation for Inner Peace at acim.org. Okay, well, that was freaky because that also kind of goes along the lines with what I was saying in the very beginning. So it's really strange because I only read this when I read it to you guys. I don't read ahead the lessons like ever. So I'll just make sure the next page is a lesson. And if it's not, if it's a review, then I'll just skip over it. And then I just read it directly to you as I'm reading it to me. So pretty interesting stuff that. All right, I'm going to take a quick break, guys. And when I come back, we are going to go over some Spanish fairy tales and folk tales. I love nights like this because it is my way of giving back and loving everybody and preserving a little bit of culture from different countries. And I go to fairytales.com, which is spelled FAIRYTALEZ.com. So Fairy Tales is an excellent resource for fairy tales from all over the world. So, because of the coronavirus has been really just affecting people in many different countries, I've been going, every few weeks I've been doing fairy tales from the countries that were more deeply affected. But, at this point it could almost be every country, right? Anyway, when we come back, I am going to read some fairy tales directly from Spain, right after this message. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's high time you did. It is the absolute easiest way to make a podcast. First of all, it's absolutely free. Second of all, they have creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or your computer. You guys have known that I've been doing this for 8 months using the Anchor.fm app right on my cell phone, and I have done it everywhere, right? I have recorded this in my living room, my bedroom, little cafes in Quito, Ecuador, all over Cuenca. It's so absolutely easy to make your podcast, and editing is just a snap. Anchor also will distribute your podcast for you, and it took me about 2.5 months to become syndicated, and now I'm available on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and many more, and so can you. You can make money from your podcast also, and there's no minimum requirement. You get paid from your very first listener. It is everything that you need to make a podcast all in one place. So please, if you are interested in making a podcast of your very own, do not hesitate to start with Anchor. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started today. All right, guys, so we are here to kind of enjoy ourselves this evening and talk a little bit about fairy tales from Spain. I will read you the stories from fairytales.com. You could look at this website for fairy tales and folk tales from around the world, and this is FAIRYTALEZ.com. And I love this website. It's pretty cool. In fact, if you write your own fairy tales, you can get published on their website. I told my son about this today, and he said, I would love to write fairy tales in which the female protagonist is the one that builds up the kingdom. As opposed to falls asleep and gets woken up by the handsome prince who has all the money and all the glory and did everything for himself and her, and she did nothing but, do something stupid like prick her finger and fall asleep, or it's always the princesses that tend to be dumb or foolish, but from Spain, from what I could see from these stories, it's not always the case with the sexism, which is refreshing, but we'll see. We're going to get into it right now and see if that's true, because I haven't read these all the way through. All right, so what it says is, here you can read Spanish fairy tales, folk tales, and legends by authors like Elsie Spicer Eels. These Spanish fairy tales include translated works from areas like Catalonia, Spain, which gives us tales like The Water of Life, as collected by Andrew Lang for the Pink Fairy Book. Eel's collection is Tales of Enchantment from Spain and features Spanish fairy tales she translated. Alright, so we're going to get into this right now. And the first one is The Carnation Youth. There once was a laborer who had a daughter whom he loved very dearly. One day, when he was on his way home from his daily work, he saw a pink carnation growing beside the path. He picked it and carried it home to his daughter. She declared that it was the most beautiful carnation she had ever seen. She put it carefully into a glass of water. That evening, as she held it in her hand, admiring it, she carelessly let it fall into the candle. The pink carnation began to burn immediately. At that moment, there suddenly appeared a handsome youth who said to the girl sadly, "Why don't you speak to me? You will have to seek me among the rocks of the whole world." Then he disappeared as mysteriously as he appeared. The poor laborer's daughter had never seen such a handsome young man in her whole life. She dreamed of him night and day. His words kept ringing in her ears. "You will have to seek me among the rocks of the whole world." There was nothing else for the girl to do except to go in search of the mysterious youth. She could no longer be happy in her own home. Accordingly, she walked and walked. Finally, she came to a high rock on the bank of a river, and as she was exceedingly tired, she sat down to rest. It was very hot, and she began to cry because of her great weariness and the intense heat. Suddenly, the rock opened, and the handsome youth stepped out. "Why are you crying?" he asked gently. The girl was so frightened that she could not say a word. She just kept on crying. The handsome youth went on. "Over there, through the forest, you will see a large house with broad fields about it. Go to the house and hire out as a servant. They will receive you gladly there." With these words, he disappeared into the rock. There was nothing better for the tired girl to do than to follow his advice, and she found the house as he had directed. The mistress of the house was in need of a maid, and she hired the girl at once. Soon the laborer's daughter became the favorite servant of the entire establishment, and her pretty face, her industrious habits, and her pleasant ways. Then the other servants became jealous, and they plotted against her to get her into trouble. They went to their mistress and said, "Do you know what your new maid has been saying in the kitchen?" Their mistress ordered them to tell her what it was. "She says you do not need to have so many servants. She alone could wash all the dirty clothes in one day." The mistress called the little maid to her and asked if it were true. The poor girl wept and said that it was false, that she never said any such thing, but the other servants agreed that they all had heard her say it. And her mistress commanded her to wash all the dirty clothes in one day, according to her boast. The little maid went to the river with the dirty clothes and sat down upon the rocks to cry. Suddenly the rock opened, and the handsome youth stepped forward. "Why are you crying?" he asked. The girl was so surprised that she did not answer, but went on crying harder than ever. Oh, she's really good at that, huh? The youth continued, "Do not worry about washing the clothes. Just leave them here on the riverbank and ask the birds of all the world to come and help you." What's up with him and all the world? The girl looked up in amazement, but the youth had disappeared into the rock. Well, she did as he advised and called out, "O birds of all the world, come and help me." Soon the birds of all the world came flocking to the riverbank. There were big birds and little birds and middle-sized birds. There were blackbirds and brown birds and bluebirds and redbirds and yellow birds. The little maid had not known there were so many kinds of birds in the whole world. The birds seized the dirty garments in their beaks and shook them up and down in the river. Soon all the soiled clothes were clean and white. And we're not going to tell you the state of the river. In the afternoon, they were dry and ready to carry home. The mistress and the other servants could not believe their eyes when they saw that the washing had all been done. The mistress loved her little maid more than ever, and told all her friends what a perfect jewel of a servant she had in her employ. Then the other servants became more jealous than ever, and thought of another plot. Now it happened that their mistress had an only son, who left the house one day and never came back. He had been enchanted. His poor mother wept until she nearly lost her eyesight. Can that happen, though? Accordingly, the servants went to their mistress and said that the new maid had boasted that she knew where to get an eye water which would cure any eye trouble in the world. Wow, I could use that right now because I don't have my reading glasses and I'm squinting. Anyway, on to the story. Of course, the poor girl, who never said such a thing, but all the servants agreed that she had, and her mistress became angry because her maid had known of an eye water which she had not obtained. Accordingly, the mistress sent the girl in search of the eye water which would restore her failing sight. The little maid went down to the riverbank and sat down upon the rocks, of course, crying, as if her heart would break. She did not know a single thing about eye waters. Well, you could have frickin' fooled me. She's constantly crying. Is that not eye water? Okay. At once the rock opened and the handsome youth stepped out. "What's the matter? Why are you crying?" he asked. And he received no reply, so he went on to say, "I know how you may obtain an eye water which will cure my mother's eyesight. Take a cup and stand by the river bank. Then call to all the birds of the world, ask them to come and weep with you." The youth disappeared. Oh, and the picture is beautiful. If you want to go to fairytales.com, you'll love this picture. So the little maid followed his advice and stood by the river bank with a cup in her hands. She asked all the birds of the world to come and weep with her, and at once they came flying up to her. Each one deposited a tear in the cup. Soon it was full. The last bird which came dropped a tiny white feather into the cup. When she had bathed the eyes of her mistress with the water, using the tiny white feather, her mistress became better immediately. Soon she could see as well as ever, and she loved her little maid more and more. The jealous servants plotted against her again, against the maid. They told their mistress that she had boasted of knowing how to break the enchantment which bound the son of the house. By this time their mistress had such confidence in her maid, she believed the girl could do anything. When she said she had never made up any such boasts, her mistress said, "Never mind, just go ahead and try. If you should succeed in breaking my son's enchantment and restoring him to me once more, I'll make you his wife." The little maid went down to the rocks beside the river and cried as if her heart would break. The handsome youth came forth from the rock as before and asked why she was crying. She did not reply, and then he said, "I know that my mother has sent you to break my enchantment. Gather together all the maidens in town, rich and poor alike, and come and march about the rocks in a procession, each girl with a lighted candle in her hand. Be sure that no candle goes out. We'll see what that will do to break my enchantment." When he had once more disappeared, the little maid ran as fast as she could to gather together all the young girls of the town, rich as well as poor. A beautiful procession they made too when they came to march about the rocks, each with a lighted candle in her hand. The little maid was the last of all in the procession, and just as she came to the rocks, the wind blew out her candle. "Oh, what shall I do? My candle has gone out," she cried. She saw that the handsome youth had already appeared. "At last you have spoken in my presence," he cried. "Now at last my enchantment is broken." "I thought I had spoiled everything when my candle went out," exclaimed the little maid. The young man explained to her how he had been enchanted one day when he was walking in the field. He had been changed into a carnation and had been told that his enchantment would be broken only when the person who burned the carnation should speak in his presence. "You did not say one word when you burned me," he told her reproachfully. "I had to go back into the rocks from which the carnation had sprung, and I began to think I'd never get you to say a word to me. You didn't do anything but cry." The youth's mother was the happiest woman in the town when she saw that her son was restored to her, alive and well. She kissed her little maid upon both cheeks. "You shall be my own dear daughter now," she told her. "The wedding shall be celebrated immediately." The little maid was entirely cured of the crying habit. Suddenly. And fortunate it was, for after all the delay in getting his enchantment broken, her husband's patience could never have endured a crying woman. What's the moral of the story, that one, you guys think? Is it just that you shouldn't be a crying woman? It's kind of silly, right? But, all right. Okay, we're going to go to the next one. Let's see. The Enchanted Castle in the Sea. This is a 13-minute read. We'll see how long it takes us. The Enchanted Castle in the Sea. Long ago, in a certain city in Spain, there lived a youth who had no fondness whatever for work, but a very great fondness for getting into debt. The foolish lad had used up his entire inheritance. There was nothing left with which to pay the pile of debts which he swiftly accumulated. One day a stranger appeared at his door, who offered to settle all his debts on condition that the young man should do a day's work for him. The youth gratefully accepted the offer, for he thought that he could at least manage one day's work, no matter how hard it was. "Be ready at 5 o'clock tomorrow morning," said the stranger as he paid the debts. The next morning the youth found the stranger at his door promptly at 5 o'clock in the morning. He was mounted on a fine black horse, and he had with him an extra bay horse upon which the boy was to ride. They rode on rapidly up hill and down, through fertile valley lands and over narrow woodland trails, until at last they reached the sea. Then the stranger, who was riding ahead, turned to the boy and said, "Far out in the sea there is a castle lined with gold and silver. You are to accompany me there to aid me in filling some sacks to carry home. So, come on." The youth looked fearfully at the angry waves. "Very well, senor," he replied. "You ride ahead, please." The stranger spurred the fine black horse into the raging sea, and there was nothing for the frightened youth to do except to follow upon the bay horse. The horses swam rapidly through the waves, and soon a great castle upon high rocks rose up before them. When they had climbed out of the water upon the rocks, the stranger said, "It is your task to enter the castle and fill these 2 sacks, one with gold, one with silver. As soon as you fill them, throw them down to me." The youth looked up at the high castle which frowned down at them from the summit of the steep rocks. "I don't see any way to get into the castle," he said. Then the stranger took a little book out of one of his pockets and he opened it. The youth felt himself suddenly rising from the ground. He screamed with fright as he slowly rose to the top of the rock and then to a little window, high up in the castle wall. He crawled into the window and filled the 2 bags, one with gold and the other with silver. He was amazed at the enormous piles of silver and gold which the castle contained. He threw the bags out of the window and prepared to descend, but to his surprise, the stranger loaded the 2 bags upon the bay horse, seated himself upon the black horse, and rode rapidly out to sea upon its back, leading the bay horse after him. The youth shouted in vain. The man never turned his head to give him even a glance. The poor boy was in despair. "Whatever shall I do?" he cried. "Here I am, stranded upon this rock, in the midst of the sea. There's nothing to eat or drink in this castle, nothing but silver and gold. What shall I do? Oh, foolish boy that I was ever to allow myself to get into a situation like this." He wandered through the castle, but saw nothing anywhere except great piles of silver and of gold. "Oh, mother of my soul," he cried, "it is my fate to die here in this deserted spot, surrounded on all sides by the angry waves. I cannot eat gold and drink silver." His hunger grew as time passed, and his thirst was even harder to endure than the hunger. At last he noticed a damp spot on one of the castle walls. "Perhaps I may be so fortunate as to find a spring of water," said he, as he eagerly began digging with his hands. He dug and dug for a long time until he was weak and faint. He found no water. All he discovered was a rat in the wall. He rested and then went on digging, and at last he came to a heavy door. He opened the door anxiously, for he did not know what might be behind it. What he saw was a narrow stone stairway leading down into the depths of the earth. The boy committed his soul both to the angels and to the devils and descended the stairway. At the foot of the stairs he found another door. It opened into a great hall. To his joy, there was a fountain of water in the middle of the room, and at the side of the fountain there was a table laden with rich foods. The first thing he did was drink some of the water of the fountain. Then he began to taste the food. "I may die, but I will at least die with a full stomach," he remarked. "What will happen next? Only the good God alone knows." At the end of the meal, the youth wandered about the great hall. Then he opened the door into the kitchen. There in the kitchen stood an old, we're just going to say woman. She was very old and very fat. She dropped the plate in her hands when she saw the boy. She was so amazed at his presence. "Poor lad, what cruel person wished such evil upon you as to lead you to this place?" she cried. The boy told her the whole story. She nodded thoughtfully. "Your punishment is greater than you deserve," she said. "But if you are quiet and an obedient lad, you may live on here in the castle. You will see no one except for me." The youth spent many days in the castle. There was at least plenty to eat and drink, but it was very lonely. Sometimes he would climb up the stairway to the upper tower of the castle and look out of the little window high up in the tower. Did you guys hear that? I'm like alone in my room and that noise just happened. I'm like, oh my god. The story's getting good and now I don't know what that was, but that was kind of freaky. Alright. So, okay, alright, here we go. He would gaze and gaze at the raging sea as it dashed angrily upon the rocks, and he longed for his old life back on the land, which lay far beyond the waves. Often he questioned the old woman in the kitchen, and at last he found out that there was a secret door in the castle wall which led to the dungeon where a beautiful princess was confined. Oh, of course. "Oh, you can never locate the door," said the old woman. "And even if you found it, you could never reach the princess. You would have to pass 2 fierce lions and constantly revolving millstones and a deadly serpent. The lions would tear you into pieces. If you escaped them, the millstones would grind you into powder. If you escaped the millstones, the serpent would recoil itself about you and fill your veins with poison. It is quite impossible to reach the princess." The youth thought of nothing except the imprisoned princess. "I found the door which led me to food and drink," he said. "Why may I not find the door which leads to the beautiful captive princess? I should at least like to peep through the door." One day a rat ran across the floor and quickly disappeared in a crack in the wall. The youth began to dig farther into the crack, and at length he discovered the door. He rested that night, though he was so excited he could not sleep a wink. The moment it was light, he started to dig again, and soon he found he had freed the door so that it would swing open. He quickly unfastened the bolt and he pushed it wide. The 2 lions, which crouched ready to spring upon him, were larger and fiercer even than he could have expected. He quickly pulled off his jacket and tossed it to them. Both the lions sprang onto the jacket and fought to obtain possession of it. The youth ran past them and through the door they guarded. The heavy millstones were revolving violently and did not stop their revolutions for a single instant. The boy threw his shirt at them. The mill wheels became clogged and he ran quickly past them. Before him appeared a huge serpent. It hissed at him angrily. Quickly he tossed his shoe to it, and the serpent's deadly fangs were embedded in the shoe. The boy escaped past it and through the door it had guarded. He had no jacket or shirt, and there was only one shoe on only one foot, but he was safe. He found himself in a room lined with gleaming gold. It was adorned with pearls and diamonds and precious stones from every part of the earth. Upon a richly carved couch lay the most beautiful maiden in the world. There was a sweet smile upon her lips, but she was fast asleep. Slowly she opened her beautiful dark eyes, and they smiled into the boy's. I think they mean the boy's eyes. Okay. "Thank you for coming to awaken me," she said. "I should have slept for 1,000 years if you had not come. I am sorry I cannot stay with you. I'll give you this so that I shall be able to recognize you again." With these words, she gave the youth a dainty handkerchief of the sheerest linen. In the corner of the handkerchief there was a coronet embroidered with skillful embroidery and stitchery. Suddenly the beautiful princess, the richly carved couch, the room lined with gold, with ornaments of pearls and diamonds and precious stones from every part of the earth, the mysterious castle, the high rocks in the middle of the waves, all disappeared. There was not a trace of them left. The boy found himself standing by the seashore in a certain town in Spain, which he knew well. He was holding in his hand a dainty handkerchief with a coronet embroidered in the corner. The youth could think of nothing except the beautiful dark eyes of the enchanted princess and her sweet smile. He sought for her in every city, in every land. He despaired of ever seeing her again, but he treasured the handkerchief carefully. At last he returned to his own city. He had been everywhere else in his search for the princess, but he had not yet visited again the familiar scenes of his boyhood. He decided to remain there for a time, and then once more renew his search. He knew that he could never rest in peace until he had once more looked upon and into the beautiful dark eyes of the enchanted princess. As he approached his own city, he saw that it was decked. Sorry, I'm having a hard time seeing here. It was decked in gala attire. There were banners and flowers everywhere. "What feast is this?" he asked the first man he came across. "Why, don't you know?" asked the man to whom he had spoken. "Where have you been that you do not know? This is the wedding day of our beautiful princess." There was no time to talk more, for at that very moment the wedding procession appeared. The lad looked at the bride, and his heart stood still. He gazed once more upon the face of the beautiful enchanted princess whom he had awakened in the castle in the sea. He ran like the wind through the crowd. He pushed aside all who got in his way. He was like a madman. Nevertheless, he reached the steps of the church long before the bridal party arrived there. As the bride came up the steps, he waved before her eyes the dainty handkerchief of sheerest linen with the royal coronet embroidered in the corner. The face of the beautiful princess turned white, and then it turned to the deepest rose. Her dark eyes shone with a great joy which filled her heart. Within the church, the clear voice of the princess rang out proudly, "I will only wed the youth who has my handkerchief with my coronet embroidered in the corner." The wedding guests looked at each other in amazement. The bridegroom searched anxiously in all of his pockets. In none of them could he find a handkerchief with the coronet of the princess in the corner. The princess turned to her father. "Send men to search for him," she cried. "He was dressed as a beggar, and he sat upon the steps of the church. It is who came to my side in the enchanted palace in the sea. It is he who woke me out of my enchantment. I gave him my handkerchief with my coronet embroidered in the corner. I will wed him and him alone." The search was made quickly. There, on the steps of the church, sat still a youth with smiling eyes, a youth dressed in shabby, dusty garments like a beggar. In his hand he held a dainty handkerchief of the sheerest linen, with a royal coronet embroidered in the corner. The former bridegroom retired in sorrow and disappointment, and the wedding was celebrated with great joy. So I don't know what that means exactly. Do you guys know what's the moral of the story of this one? That if you face your fears and act bravely, you'll be rewarded, maybe? Maybe that's it? Alright, there's another one that looked kind of funny. We're going to read this one. The Half Chick. This one is 9 minutes long. Okay. This is taken from Andrew Lang's Fairy Books in Spanish. Once upon a time, there was a handsome black Spanish hen who had a large brood of chickens. They were all fine, plump little birds, except for the youngest, who was quite unlike his brothers and sisters. Indeed, he was such a strange, queer-looking creature that when he first chipped his shell, his mother could scarcely believe her eyes. He was so different from the 12 other fluffy, downy, soft little chicks who nestled under her wings. This one looked just as if he had been cut in two. He had only one leg, one wing, and one eye. He had half a head and half a beak. His mother shook her head sadly as she looked at him, and she said, "My youngest born is only a half chick. He can never grow up to be a tall, handsome cock like all his brothers. They will go out into the world and rule over the poultry yards of their own. But this poor little fellow will always have to stay at home with his mother," and she called him medio polito, which is Spanish for half chick. And by the way, do you guys hear the roosters crowing in the background as I read this? I don't know if you can hear it. I know I can hear it, but there they go again. Okay. Now, though Medio Polito was such an odd, helpless-looking little thing, his mother soon found out that he was not at all willing to remain under her wing and protection. Indeed, in character, he was as unlike his brothers and sisters as he was in appearance. They were good, obedient chickens, and when the old hen chicked after them, they chirped and ran back to her side. Oh, but Medio Polito had a roving spirit in spite of his one leg. And when his mother called to him to return to the coop, he pretended that he could not hear because he only had one ear. When she took the whole family out for a walk in the fields, Medio Polito would hop away by himself and hide among the Indian corn. Many an anxious minute his brothers and sisters had looking for him, while his mother ran to and fro, cackling in fear and dismay. As he grew older, he became more self-willed and disobedient, and his manner to his mother often was very rude, and his temper to the other chickens very disagreeable. One day he had been out for a longer expedition than usual in the fields. On his return, he strutted up to his mother with his peculiar little hop and kick, which was his way of walking, and cocking his one eye at her in a very bold way, he said, "Mother, I am tired of this life in a dull farmyard, with nothing but a dreary maize field to look at. I'm off to Madrid to see the king." "To Madrid, Medio Polito," exclaimed his mother. "Why, you silly chick, it would be a long journey for a grown-up cock, and a poor little thing like you would be tired out before you had gone half the distance. No, stay at home with your mother. Some day when you're bigger, we will go on a little journey together." Oh, but Medio Polito had already made up his mind, and he would not listen to his mother's advice, nor to the prayers and entreaties of his brothers and sisters. "What is the use of all our crowding each other up in this poky little place," he said, "when I have a fine courtyard of my own at the king's palace? I shall perhaps ask some of you to come and pay me a short visit." And scarcely waiting to say goodbye to his family, away he stumped down the high road that led to Madrid. "Be sure that you are kind and civil to everyone you meet," called his mother, running after him. But he was in such a hurry to be off that he did not wait to answer her or even look back. A little later in the day, he was taking a shortcut through a field and he passed by a stream. Now, the stream was all choked up and overgrown with weeds and water plants, so that its waters could not flow freely. "Oh, Medio Polito," it cried, as the half-chick hopped along its banks, "do come and help me by clearing away these weeds." "Help you indeed," exclaimed Medio Polito, tossing his head, shaking the few feathers in his tail. "Do you think I have nothing to do but waste my time on such trifles? Help yourself, and don't trouble busy travelers. I'm off to Madrid to see the king." And hoppity-kick, away stumped Medio Polito. A little later he came to a fire that had been left by some gypsies in a wood. It was burning very low and would soon be out. "Oh, Medio Polito," cried the fire in a weak, wavering voice, as the half-chick approached, "in a few minutes I shall go quite out, unless you put some sticks and dry leaves upon me. Do help me, or I shall die." "Help you indeed," answered Medio Polito. "I have other things to do. Gather sticks for yourself. Don't trouble me. I'm off to Madrid to see the king." And hoppity-kick, away stumped Medio Polito. The next morning, as he was getting near Madrid, he passed a large chestnut tree in whose branches the wind was caught and entangled. "Oh, Medio Polito," called the wind, "do hop up here and help me get free of these branches. I cannot come away, and oh, it's so uncomfortable." "It is your own fault for getting there," answered Medio Polito. "I can't waste all my morning stopping here to help you. Just shake yourself off and don't hinder me, for I am off to Madrid to see the king." And hoppity-kick, away stumped Medio Polito in great glee, for the towers and roofs of Madrid now were in his sights. When he entered the town, he saw before him a great splendid house, and soldiers were standing before the gates. This, he knew, must be the king's palace, and he determined to hop on up to the front gate and wait there until the king came out. But as he's hopping past one of the back windows, the king's cook saw him. "Here's the very thing I want," he exclaimed, "for the king has just sent a message to say that he must have chicken broth for his dinner." And opening the window, he stretched out his arm and he caught Medio Polito, popped him into the broth pot that was standing near the fire. Oh, how wet and clammy the water felt as it went over Medio Polito's head, making his feathers cling to his side. "Water, water," he cried in his despair. "Do have pity upon me, and do not wet me like this." "Ah, Medio Polito," replied the water, "you would not help me when I was a little stream away in the fields. Now you must be punished." Then the fire began to burn and scald Medio Polito, and he danced and hopped from one side of the pot to the other, trying to get away from the heat, and he cried out in pain, "Fire, fire, do not scorch me like this. You can't think how it hurts." "Ah, Medio Polito," answered the fire, "you will not help us? You will not help me when I was dying away in the wood? You are being punished." At last, just when the pain was so great that Medio Polito thought he must die, the cook lifted up the lid of the pot to see if the broth was ready for the king's dinner. "Look here," he cried in horror, "this chicken is quite useless. It is burned to a cinder. I can't send it up to the royal table." And opening the window, he threw Medio Polito out into the street. But the wind caught him up and whirled him through the air so quickly that Medio Polito could scarcely breathe, and his heart beat against his side till he thought it would break. "Oh, wind," he at last gasped out, If you hurry me along like this, you will kill me. Do let me rest a moment, or... But he was so breathless he could not even finish his sentence. Ah, Medio Polito, replied the wind. When I was caught up in the branches of the chestnut tree, you would not help me. Now you are being punished. As he swirled about, Medio Polito went over the roofs of the houses until they reached the highest church in the town. There he left him fastened to the top of the steeple. And there stands Medio Polito to this day. And if you go to Madrid and you walk through the streets till you come to the highest church, you will still see Medio Polito perched on his one leg on the steeple, with his one wing drooping at his side, and gazing sadly out of his one eye over the town. Wow! I thought this was going to be some story about how it's not wise to go off half-cocked. But apparently this story is about how weather vanes in the shape of roosters got to be upon the tops of all the houses to tell us which way the weather's blowing. That is actually pretty clever. I liked that. All right, let's see if we have time for one more. We have about less than 15 minutes, so we'll see what we can do. Let me see. All right, we have The Water of Life, which is a Catalan fairy tale. All right. 3 brothers and 1 sister lived together in a small cottage. They loved one another very dearly. One day, the eldest brother, who had never done anything but amuse himself from sunrise to sunset, he said to the rest, "Let us all work hard, and perhaps we shall grow rich and be able to build ourselves a palace." And his brothers and sisters answered joyfully, "Yes, we will all work." So they fell to working with all their might, till at last they became rich and were able to build themselves a beautiful palace, and everyone came for miles around to see its wonders and to say how splendid it was. No one thought of finding any faults, till at length an old woman, who had been walking through the rooms with a crowd of people, suddenly exclaimed, "Yes, it is a splendid palace, but there is still something that it needs." "What may that be?" "A church," she said. When they heard this, the brothers set to work again to earn more money, and when they got enough, they set about building a church, which should be as large and beautiful as a palace itself. And after the church was finished, greater numbers of people than ever flocked to see the palace and the church, and vast gardens and magnificent halls. But one day, as the brothers were, as usual, doing the honors to their guests, an old man turned to them and said, "Yes, it is almost beautiful, but there's still one thing it needs." "And what may that be?" they said. "A pitcher of the water of life, a branch of the tree of the smell, whose flowers gives eternal beauty, and the talking bird." "And where am I to find all those?" "Go to the mountain that is far off yonder, and you will find what you seek." After the old man had bowed politely and taken farewell of them, the eldest brother said to the rest, "I will go in search of the water of life, the talking bird, and the tree of beauty." "But suppose some evil thing befalls you?" asked his sister. "How shall we know?" "You are right," he replied. "I had not thought about that." Then they followed the old man and said to him, My eldest brother wishes to seek for the water of life and the tree of beauty and the talking bird that you tell him are needful to make our palace perfect. But how shall we know if any evil thing befall him?" So the old man took them a knife and gave it to them. He said, "Keep this carefully, and as long as the blade is bright, all is well. But if the blade is bloody, then know that evil has indeed befallen him." The brothers thanked him and departed, and they went straight into the palace, where they found the young man making ready to set out for the mountain where the treasures he longed for lay hid. And he walked and he walked and he walked till he had gone a great way, and there he met a giant. "Can you tell me how much farther I still have to go before I reach that mountain yonder?" "And why do you wish to go there?" "I'm seeking the water of life, the talking bird, and a branch of the tree of beauty." Many have passed by seeking those treasures, but none have ever come back, and you will never come back either, unless you mark my words. Follow this path, and when you reach the mountain, you'll find it covered with stones. Do not stop to look at them, but keep upon your way. As you go, you will hear scoffs and laughs behind you. It will be the stones that mock you. Do not heed them. Above all, do not turn round. If you do, you will become one of them. Walk straight on until you get to the top, and then you take all you wish for. The young man thanked him for his counsel and walked and walked and walked until he reached the mountain. And as he climbed, he heard behind him scoffs and jeers, but he kept his ears steadily close to them. At last, the noise grew so loud, he lost his patience, and he stopped to pick up a stone to hurl into the midst of the clamor, when suddenly his arm seemed to stiffen, and the next moment he was a stone himself. That day, sister, who thought her brother's steps were long in returning, took out the knife and found the blade was red as blood. Then she cried out to her brothers that something terrible has happened and has come to pass. "I will go and find him," said the second, and he went. As he walked and walked and walked till he met the giant, he asked him if he had seen a young man traveling towards a mountain. And the giant answered, of course, "Yes, I have seen him pass, but I've not seen him come back. The spell must have worked upon him." "Then what can I do to disenchant him and find the water of life, the talking bird, and a branch of the tree of beauty?" "Follow this path, and when you reach the mountain, you'll find it covered with stones. Do not stop and look at them, but climb readily on. Above all, heed not the laughs and scoffs that will arise on all sides, and never turn around. And when you reach the top, you can then take all you desire." Now the young man thanked him for his counsel and set out for the mountain. But no sooner did he reach it than the loud jests and the jibes broke out upon him in every side, and almost deafened him. For some time he let them rail and pushed boldly on, till he passed the place where his brother had gained. Then he suddenly thought that among the scoffing sounds he heard his brother's voice. He stopped and he looked back. Oops. And another stone was added to the number. Meanwhile, the sister left at home was counting the days when her two brothers should return home to her. This time seemed long, and it would be hard to say how often she took out the knife and looked at its polished blade to make sure that this one at least was still safe. The blade was always bright and clear. Each time she looked, she had the happiness of knowing that all was well, till one evening, tired and anxious as she frequently was at the end of the day, she took it from the drawer, and behold, the blade was red with blood. Her cry of horror brought her youngest brother to her, and unable to speak, she held out the knife. "I will go," he said. So he walked and he walked and he walked until he met the giant, and he asked, "Have two young men making for yonder mountain passed this way?" The giant answered, "Yes, they have passed by, but they have never come back. By this I know that the spell has fallen upon them. Then what must I do to free them and to get the water of life and the talking bird and the branch of the tree of beauty?" "Go to the mountain, which you'll find so thickly covered with stones, you'll hardly be able to place your feet, and walk straight forward, turning neither to the right nor the left, and pay no heed to the laughs and the scoffs, which will follow you till you reach the top, and then you may take all that you desire." The young man thanked the giant for his counsel and set forth to the mountain. When he began to climb, there burst forth all around him a storm of scoffs and jeers. But he thought of the giant's words and looked neither to the right hand nor the left, till the mountain top lay straight before him. A moment now, and he would have gained it, when, through the groans and yells, he heard his brothers' voices. He turned, and there was one stone more. Oh no, he almost got there, right? And all this while his sister was pacing up and down the palace, hardly laying the knife out of her hand, and deciding and dreading what she knew she would see, and what she did see. The blade grew red before her eyes, and she said, "Now it's my turn." So she walked and walked and walked till she came to the giant, and prayed him to tell her if he had seen 3 young men pass that way, seeking the distant mountain. "I'd seen them pass, but they never returned, and by this I know the spell has fallen upon them. And what I must do to set them free, find the water of life, the talking bird, and the branch of the tree of beauty. You must go to the mountain, which is so full of stones that your feet will hardly find a place to tread. And as you climb, you'll hear a noise as if all the stones in the world were mocking you. Pay no heed to anything you might hear, and once you gain the top, you have gained everything." The girl thanked him for his counsel and set out for the mountain. And scarcely she had gone a few steps upward when cries and screams broke forth all around her, and she felt as if each stone she trod on was a living thing. But she remembered the words of the giant, and knew not what had befallen her brothers. And she kept her face steadily towards the mountain top, which grew nearer and nearer every moment. But as she mounted, the clamor increased 7-fold. High above all them rang the voices of her 3 brothers. But the girl took no heed, and at last her feet stood open upon the top. Then she looked around and saw, lying in a hollow, the pool of the water of life. And she took the brazen pitcher that she had brought with her and filled it to the brim. By the side of the pool stood the tree of beauty, with the talking bird on one of its boughs, and she caught the bird and placed it in a cage and broke off one of the branches. After that she turned and went joyfully down the hill, again carrying her treasures. But her long climb had tired her out, and the brazen pitcher was very heavy. and as she walked, a few drops of water spilt upon the stones, and as it touched them, they changed into young men and maidens, crowding about her to give thanks for their deliverance. So she learned by this how the evil spell might be broken, and she carefully sprinkled every stone till there was not one left, only a great company of youths and girls who followed her down the mountain. When they arrived at the palace, she did not lose a moment in planting the branch of the tree of beauty and watering it with the water of life. And the branch shot up into a tree, was heavy with flowers, and the talking bird nestled in its branches. Now, the fame of these wonders was noised abroad, and the people flocked in great numbers to see the three marvels and the maiden who had won them. And among the sightseers came the son of the king, who would not go till everything was shown him, until he had heard how it all had happened. And the prince admired the strangeness and the beauty of the treasures in the palace. But more than all of this, he admired the beauty and the courage of the maiden who had brought them there. So he went home and told his parents and gained their consent to wed her for his wife. Then the marriage was celebrated in the church adjoining the palace. Then the bridegroom took her to his own home, where they lived happily forever after. All right, so I don't know about you guys, but I was happily surprised by these stories, including this last one, Water of Life, because usually it's the woman in trouble and the man has to rescue her. But now, in this case, it's her brothers that kind of messed up, and she had to be the strong one. And it was her bravery that won, in the end, the handsome prince who was to be king, I suppose. I don't get why they would build such a big, beautiful palace and then she would leave it, but okay. Sometimes we have to make adjustments when we find the one, right? I'm actually surprised at the remarkable lack of sexism in these stories, and so I take it all back. These are pretty cool, actually. Maybe I'll read other stories from Spain in the future. But I like to read these stories from countries that have been deeply affected by coronavirus. We can listen to their stories of old and at the same time send the people that live there now love and light and healing energies as we enjoy hearing the stories of their past. Anyway, that's it. That's all for tonight. I wanted to thank each and every one of you for your continued faith and listenership. Thank you for listening to me night after night. I love each and every one of you, and I'm grateful that we're all on the spiritual path together. I will be back tomorrow with all unique and original programming, just like always. Tomorrow is Friday, and that means it is Earth Changes Day. We're going to see how much of the earth changes we can get through. If we have time, I will always throw in some weird news if I can. So with that being said, it's time I go to bed. Thank you guys. I'll be back tomorrow. We'll start all over again. But right now, I'm signing off with peace and joy and the high vibes of the Holy Fifth Dimension. Until next time, guys, peace. Metaphysical Soul Speak is run on sponsors and listener support. This means listeners like you. If you are so inclined to support my efforts and my little podcast, please visit me at anchor.fm/metaphysical and pledge an amount of your choosing today. Thank you.